Welcome to Rare Breed Brotherhood. The truth has no panic in it. It waits while lies rush to cover themselves. There's a reason you're not like most people. You don't chase drama. You don't fall for emotional traps. And when someone tries to twist the story to make themselves look innocent, you don't fight with noise. You fight with clarity. That's what makes you a Sigma male. You don't just carry strength. You carry responsibility for your own energy, your actions, and your truth. That's rare. People like you are hard to manipulate, and that bothers those who rely on confusion to get what they want. When they couldn't control you, they played the victim. They cried, they blamed, they tried to flip the story. But instead of backing down, you made them face what they were trying to run from. Not through revenge, not through public shaming, but by refusing to pretend they were right when they were clearly wrong. That takes discipline, it takes wisdom, and it takes a kind of emotional control most people never develop. You didn't need a crowd to support you. You didn't need to defend yourself every 5 minutes. You let the truth sit, and slowly, it did its job. So if you ever feel tired of being the one who sees things clearly, who holds people to their own words, remember this. Not everyone has the courage to keep things real, but you do. That's what makes you a Sigma. And that's why you're dangerous to people who hide behind lies. Let's dive in rare breeds. Number 1, you don't scream for justice. You become it. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You don't go around demanding justice or begging people to see your side, because deep down, you already know that truth does not beg. It just exists. It stands still while lies eventually collapse around it. When someone wrongs you and plays the victim to escape the blame, you don't panic. You don't run around trying to explain yourself to everyone. You don't throw tantrums or try to ruin their reputation. That's not your style. What you do instead is far more powerful. You stay calm, you stay focused, and you let time do what it does best. You let the truth rise while their act slowly falls apart. You're the type of man who doesn't just speak about fairness. You live it. You embody it in the way you treat people, in the way you set your boundaries, and in the way you handle betrayal. While others are quick to yell and point fingers, you observe, you calculate, and when the moment is right, you make your move. Not to get even, but to make sure the truth is seen and felt. People expect chaos when they try to cover their lies. But when you meet them with composure and clarity, it shakes them in a way they never saw coming. That's the Sigma way. You don't become the storm. You become the consequence they never prepared for. And that's why you're dangerous to those who play games. Because you don't just want justice. You are the justice. You make people look at themselves without the cushion of denial. You don't humiliate. You don't destroy. You simply stand firm and let the truth speak through your actions. That level of control, that quiet strength, that's what makes you unstoppable. Number 2, you strip them of their comfort in delusion. Some people survive by fooling others. They spin stories, twist facts, and play the victim just enough to win sympathy and dodge accountability. That's their safety net. That's the fantasy they live in. A world where they're never at fault and always misunderstood, and it usually works, until they cross someone like you. You don't come with anger. You don't yell or throw accusations in every direction. You observe, you connect the dots, you pay attention to what people say, and even more to what they do. And when something doesn't add up, you don't look away. You start collecting patterns, taking mental notes, remembering every contradiction. You don't confront them out of emotion. You confront them with clarity. You don't guess, you bring the facts, you don't assume, you show the trail they left behind. You calmly expose the cracks in their story, not to embarrass them, but because the truth deserves light. And once the truth is out, they have nowhere left to hide. You didn't humiliate them. They just weren't ready to see themselves without the excuses. And when you held up that mirror, their entire performance started to crumble. The guilt they pushed onto you, it boomeranged back. The sympathy they stole, gone. The game, over. That's what makes you different. You don't play along with false realities. You don't comfort lies or soften the blow just to keep the peace. You call things what they are. And that honesty, especially when it's delivered without rage, is the kind of sharp that cuts deep. This is the part most people never see, the quiet way you dismantle deception without ever raising your voice. You simply refuse to let people live comfortably in the lies they've built. And once you do that, their fake world has no choice but to collapse. That's not cruelty, that's truth in motion, that's Sigma. Number 3, you killed their control with indifference. Manipulators feed off reactions. They poke, provoke, and push just to see how far they can bend you. When they sense empathy in you, they don't respect it. They try to use it. They twist your kindness into weakness, hoping you'll cave just to keep the peace. But when they tried that with you, something unexpected happened. You didn't argue. You didn't chase. You didn't explain. You simply stopped caring. That's what shook them. See, when someone's built their entire strategy around controlling your emotions, the moment you stop giving them any, their power dies. Your silence, that wasn't passive, that was the final blow. Your disinterest didn't just reject their manipulation, it stripped it of oxygen. They wanted drama, tears, confusion. Instead, they got calm, stillness, nothing. That's when it hit them. You weren't angry, you were done. And there's a huge difference between someone who's mad and someone who's done. One can still be pulled back into the game, the other has already left the board. You didn't give speeches, you didn't try to teach them a lesson, you just let your distance do all the talking. And that distance spoke volumes. It told them you no longer saw them as worth the fight. And for someone who thrives on control, that's unbearable. You didn't have to slam a door, you just stopped opening it. And in that moment, they realized the grip they thought they had on you was nothing more than illusion. That's what sets you apart. You don't destroy people with chaos. You end them with clarity. And when someone tries to weaponize your good heart, your indifference becomes your defense. Not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. You saw through the act. You unplugged from the game. And in doing so, you took away the one thing they never thought you'd take. Your attention. Number 4, you rewrote the narrative without needing a crowd. Some people are loud when they feel guilty. They scramble to spin stories, gather sympathy, and flip the blame before the truth can settle. They think if they get to others first, they can control the story. They expect you to play the same game, argue, explain, defend yourself in every room they've poisoned. But instead, you did something they never expected. You stayed silent. You didn't run from it. You didn't chase approval or try to drag people to your side. You let them talk. You let them build their version of events, and you gave it space to breathe. Because you knew something they didn't. A lie always collapses when it's told too many times. They wanted drama. You gave them distance. They wanted attention. You gave them absence. And without the fuel of your reaction, their version of the story started falling apart on its own. The cracks showed up in their words. The inconsistencies piled up. People started noticing, not because you pointed it out, but because lies have a way of exposing themselves when left alone long enough. And while they were busy defending a story that kept changing, you were focused on building your next chapter, quietly, steadily, without needing an audience. That's the strength most people don't understand. Power doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it's the decision to keep walking while others stay stuck in the mess they created. You didn't fight for control of the narrative. You just let the truth sit, calm, clear, and undefeated. That kind of self-control, it speaks louder than any argument ever could. You prove that you don't need noise to win. You just need time and consistency. And in the end, your silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. You didn't clear your name. You let the truth do it for you. Number 5, you made accountability inescapable, not optional. Most people who play the victim know exactly what they're doing. They rely on confusion. They tell half-truths and twist the rest. They expect you to get emotional, lose focus, and give them a way out. But you didn't. You weren't chasing closure. You weren't there to argue. You were there to deliver clarity. And you did it so calmly, so logically that it left no room for escape. You didn't need drama. You had facts. You had patterns. You had receipts. You remembered what they said when they thought you weren't paying attention. You remembered what they did when they assumed there'd be no consequences. And when the time came, you laid it all out, not to hurt them, but to reveal what they refused to face. You didn't raise your voice. You raised the standard. You stayed steady while their story kept shifting. And the more they tried to spin it, the worse it got. Because the truth doesn't bend. It doesn't change to make anyone comfortable. It just waits. And when you brought it forward, it didn't need backup. It stood on its own. That's what broke them. Not your anger, but your precision. Not your ego, but your refusal to let them off easy. You didn't shame them. You didn't chase revenge. You just held up a mirror and made sure they looked into it. There was no door to run through. No version of the story where they were still innocent. You stripped away every excuse, every lie, every emotional trap, and what was left was the truth, plain and undeniable. That's what Sigma strength looks like. It's not loud, it's not messy, it's clean, sharp, and unshakable. And when you bring that kind of energy, accountability isn't a choice, it's a wall they can't get around. Number 6, you didn't forgive prematurely, you let it burn. Forgiveness is powerful, but only when it's earned. You've seen how people throw around apologies like bandages, hoping a few sweet words will erase damage they never intended to fix. They say sorry, not because they understand what they did, but because they want to skip the consequences. They want to move on without doing the work. But you didn't play along. You didn't hand out forgiveness just to make things look okay. You let the damage breathe. You let the fallout happen. Because deep down, you knew something most people avoid. Forgiving someone who hasn't changed isn't healing. It's self-betrayal. You didn't give them closure as a gift. You didn't rush to clean up the mess they made. You stepped back and let it collapse under its own weight. And yes, it burned. It got uncomfortable. The silence grew heavy. The distance hurt. But that was the point. You wanted the truth to be felt, not skipped. They expected you to smooth it over, to say, it's fine, just to keep things from falling apart. But you didn't. You let it fall. You watched the fake smiles fade. You watched the story they told others lose power. And you didn't interrupt. You let them taste the bitterness of what they'd done. That wasn't cruelty, that was clarity. Because forgiveness is sacred, it means something. And if someone wants it, they have to face what they did without excuses, without shortcuts. You don't give peace to people who've only earned comfort. You wait, you watch. And only when there's truth, ownership, and real change do you consider it. Until then, you let it burn. And in that fire, illusions die, masks melt, and real accountability begins. That's not heartlessness. That's strength with standards. Number 7, you knew their pain was manufactured and called it out. Some people cry to heal, others cry to manipulate. You learned the difference. While others rushed in with comfort and apologies, you paused. You looked deeper. You saw the cracks in the story, the timing, the drama, the sudden flood of emotion when the heat turned up. That wasn't real pain, that was theater. They used emotion like a weapon, a tool to dodge responsibility. And to the untrained eye, it worked. People backed off. They softened. They gave the benefit of the doubt. But not you. You didn't confuse noise with truth. You didn't fall for the well-rehearsed act. You saw through it, not because you're cold, but because you know what real pain looks like. You've been through enough to spot the difference. Real pain humbles. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't twist facts or look for loopholes. It owns what happened. It changes. It doesn't beg to escape the consequences. It accepts them. So when they tried to use tears as a shield, you didn't flinch. You didn't hand them sympathy they didn't earn. You let them sit in it. You let the silence call out what they were trying to cover up. And the more they performed, the clearer it became. This wasn't a breakdown, it was a strategy. That's what makes you dangerous to manipulators. You don't run from emotion, but you don't let it blind you either. You watch. You listen. You wait. And when you speak, it cuts right through the act. You didn't play along. You didn't soften the truth to protect their feelings. You let their performance fall flat. Not because you're heartless, but because you're done pretending. And when someone uses pain as a prop, the only real kindness is calling it what it is. You did that. Without anger, without spectacle, just the truth, steady and sharp. Number 8, you weaponized their inconsistencies. You didn't need to raise your voice or create a scene. You just listened, carefully, patiently. Because people who lie always reveal themselves, not through what they hide, but through what they can't keep straight. And you caught it. Every shifted timeline, every changed detail, every emotional outburst that didn't match the facts. You didn't confront them with anger, you confronted them with precision. You asked the kind of questions that don't need to be loud to be lethal, calm, direct, and timed perfectly. You weren't trying to trap them, you just let them speak, and watched as their story twisted itself into knots. That's the thing about manipulators. They expect to be challenged emotionally, not logically. They prepare for a fight, not for silence, not for someone who actually remembers what was said 2 weeks ago, not for someone who's paying attention to what's not being said. So when you started asking questions, not to attack, but to understand, they panicked. You weren't accusing, you were clarifying, you weren't defensive, you were observing. And suddenly, the room got quiet. Not because you were loud, but because they were crumbling, slowly, publicly, under the weight of their own contradictions. You didn't build a case. You let them build it, then let it collapse on its own. You made them face the version of themselves they pretended didn't exist. No shouting, no speeches, just a few honest questions and a memory sharp enough to slice through every lie they stacked on top of each other. That's not revenge, that's mastery. Because you didn't destroy them with rage. You let the truth eat through the mask. One inconsistency at a time. You showed them what it's like to be outplayed by someone who refuses to be emotional bait, someone who keeps receipts, and someone who turns patterns into proof. That's how you dismantle deception, from the inside out. Number 9, you refused to be their emotional dumping ground. They thought you were safe, not in a respectful way, but in a selfish one. Safe to unload on, safe to spin their mess into sympathy, safe to transfer guilt, blame, and anxiety onto you every time life didn't go their way. They came to you not to grow, not to fix anything, but to dump. And for a while maybe you let it slide. You listened. You tried to help. You offered patience because you believed in understanding. But after enough circles, enough one-sided conversations, and enough guilt-laced manipulation, you woke up. You realized they weren't looking for support, they were looking for escape, and you were the escape route. Every meltdown, every crisis, every emotional spiral they caused but never took responsibility for. They brought it to you, expecting you to carry it, process it, and still be there smiling afterward. They drained you. Not because you were weak, but because they knew you had the kind of strength that rarely asks for anything in return. But even strength has limits. So you closed the door, not with a fight, not with revenge, but with clarity. You stopped answering the texts that only came when they needed to vent. You stopped absorbing the guilt trips dressed as apologies. You stopped letting them infect your peace with their chaos and call it connection. That was the shift, not in volume, but in access. You didn't yell, you just stopped being available. And that silence, that boundary, it shook them more than anything you could have said. Because manipulators don't fear confrontation. They fear indifference. They fear not having the outlet anymore. You made it clear. Your peace is not a dumping ground. Your presence is not for emotional freeloaders. You're done being the sponge for someone else's storm. You didn't abandon them. You just refused to carry what was never yours. Number 10, you didn't try to save them. You let them drown in truth. There comes a point where trying to help someone becomes the very thing keeping them broken. You saw that clearly. Every time you extended grace, they used it as cover. Every time you offered understanding, they twisted it into another excuse. You weren't helping them evolve. You were keeping them from hitting bottom, and they knew it. But instead of gratitude, they gave you manipulation. Instead of progress, they gave you circles. So you did the hardest thing someone with a good heart can do. You stepped back. Not because you stopped caring, but because you cared too much to keep playing into their denial. You let them sit in the mess they made. You let the mirror reflect everything they'd been avoiding. You didn't scream, you didn't threaten, you didn't chase. You just walked away and left the truth standing behind you like a wall they could no longer ignore. You let them feel what it's like when accountability isn't softened. When there's no emotional pillow to land on. When someone finally says, "No, I'm not fixing this again." That silence, that absence, that's where the real lesson begins. And it's not cruel. It's honest. Because some people only grow when the scaffolding is removed. Some people only change when the lies stop working. You didn't let them drown in bitterness or shame. You let them drown in truth, the one they kept dodging, denying, and decorating with fake pain and false stories. You didn't save them because it wasn't your job to. You had already done enough. And the truth is, your absence did more than your presence ever could. It exposed them. It forced them to see the damage. And maybe for the first time, feel it. That wasn't giving up. That was setting them free, without protecting them from the cost. Number 11. You were brutally honest, when it was easier to walk away. Most people avoid confrontation because it's messy, because it's uncomfortable, because telling the truth might make someone cry, lash out, or twist it back on you, so they bite their tongue, they ghost. They walk away quietly and let lies keep circulating like secondhand smoke. But you didn't do that. You took the harder path. You looked them in the eye and told them what no one else dared to. You stripped the sugar off your words. You didn't cushion the blow. You made it clear, unfiltered, clean. Truth delivered like a surgeon's blade, not to destroy, but to expose what was rotting underneath. It would have been easier to disappear, to stay quiet and let karma do the heavy lifting. But your integrity doesn't work like that. You don't ghost people who need a mirror shoved in front of them. You make them face it. You make the lie collapse in real time. You don't scream. You don't rant. You just speak with such clarity and detachment that it hits harder than rage ever could. You knew they wouldn't take it well, that they'd probably paint you as the villain, but you also knew someone had to say it, not for drama, not for revenge, but because fake apologies and performative guilt need a hard wall to crash into, and that wall was you. That's what separates you. You don't lie to keep the peace. You don't water down the truth just to avoid discomfort. You say what needs to be said, exactly how it needs to be said, and you don't flinch when it lands. Brutal honesty isn't cruelty. It's clarity most people aren't ready for. You gave them that, not to punish but to wake them up, even if it cost you the connection. Because your loyalty is to the truth, not their comfort. In conclusion, real strength doesn't raise its voice, it just refuses to be moved. Being a Sigma male means you don't chase applause. You don't argue to prove your worth. You don't fight to win people's approval. You stand firm in truth even when it makes others uncomfortable. And when someone tries to twist the story, when they use tears and blame as weapons, you don't flinch. You watch, you listen. And then you deliver the one thing most people can't handle: clarity. They played the victim hoping you'd fold. They counted on your empathy. They thought your silence meant weakness. But you showed them something different. You showed them that accountability doesn't always come with rage. Sometimes it arrives dressed in calm, backed by memory, and reinforced by evidence. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped letting them escape the truth. This is why you are who you are. You carry solitude like armor. You don't need crowds to confirm what you already know. You trust your instincts because they are sharp from experience. You let people reveal themselves, then you respond with a kind of strength that can't be faked. Quiet, calculated, unshakable. What you did took courage. Not the kind people cheer for, the kind that often goes unnoticed but leaves permanent impact. You didn't stoop to their level. You elevated the situation by not reacting, just revealing. So keep walking the path only a few can handle. Your silence is sharp, your presence is steady, and your refusal to let lies live unchecked, that is what separates you. You don't need to raise your voice, you just need to be present. And the truth follows. You are not just a Sigma male. You are proof that strength can be still and still shake everything. Thank you for watching. God bless you.